I'm sure you've seen this billboard. It looks like it's a billboard from Maxime, the leader of the People's Party, and that's his face, of course, and you can see his party's logo. But as you can see by the small print underneath, that billboard is actually produced by a registered third-party campaign group for the upcoming election. There were literally more than 100 such third-party campaign groups that registered with Elections Canada in 2015. Most of them were environmental groups or public sector labor unions. I've looked through this list several times and I can just find one single pro-Harper group amongst it, and they didn't do much of the election. The anti-Harper third-party groups did a lot. And they were very strategic in ridings where Harper and the Conservatives were vulnerable. These third-party groups polled which of the parties had the best chance of winning, the Liberals or the NDP, and then they campaigned for that choice most likely to win. This helped tip British Columbia into the Liberal column, was used in other ridings across the country too. It was very much underreported by the media because, like I was saying, 99% of these third-party groups are left-wing, so media party journalists don't think they need any scrutiny. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention the media party journalists themselves are also on the list of third-party campaign groups. Look at that. The Canadian Media Guild, Unifor, literally funded campaigns against Stephen Harper. So those neutral, independent media party reporters who tell you what happened every night on the campaign trail, yeah, they're not neutral. They are literally paying from their own pocket, from their own salaries in the form of union dues to campaign against Harper and against Andrew Scheer this time. So they're biased. I mean, you saw this tweet by Unifor. They don't disclose their bias either. When was the last time you saw a disclaimer after a media party journalist just trashes the Conservatives on TV, saw a disclaimer that they personally contributed to an election campaign against the Conservatives? They are. I mean, how's that really different from a journalist joining the Liberal Party and donating to the Liberal Party directly? It's not different. Well, my friends, if ethics were a thing to Canadian journalists, I don't think they'd be lining up, salivating for their cut of a $600 million bailout from Trudeau. I mean, once you've decided to sell yourself for cash, I guess the only remaining question is what your price is and how far you will go. And with Canadian journalists, we haven't actually found the bottom yet. They seem to be willing to do anything for their new master. I'll come back to the media party in a moment, but first back to these third-party campaign signs that support Bernier. They simply say no to mass immigration. That's it. They don't say no to all immigration, which is another point of view. They don't say no to immigration from terrorist-infested countries, or even they don't say no to refugees. They just say no to mass immigration. Mass means massive numbers, open borders style immigration. You could probably include the 50,000 fraudulent refugees who've just walked across the illegal border crossing from New York State into Quebec in that mass. I mean, 50,000 fakers and liars. As a matter of fact, and as a matter of law, if you are in the United States, you are not a refugee anymore. But it's the 50,000 part that is the mass part. Ahmed Hassan himself is a Muslim refugee from Somalia, and he has announced plans that he will bring in more than 1 million more migrants to Canada in the next 3 years, 40% of whom are uneconomic. They're either old and sick or illiterate or refugees or in some other category. Just bringing them in to join our already long lineups for hospital emergency rooms, for food banks and schools. How do you feel about that? We're sometimes told that we need mass immigration to do economic work in Canada, but if you're saying right from the outset that nearly half the people you're bringing in as immigrants are not economic and never will be, why are you lying? It's the mass part. Anyone who wonders why wages are depressed, why rents are high, why universities are crowded, why traffic is terrible, it's the mass part. You can't add 1 million people to Canada in 3 years and expect those things not to happen. Anyone who wonders why we don't have better integration and assimilation culturally, it's the mass part. Because it's the mass part that allows enclaves where people can live as they live back in Somalia or wherever. I keep thinking of this video that Ami Horowitz did in Minnesota, but really you could film something identical in many parts of Toronto, Montreal too. Have you ever seen this before?
If you had a choice, would you rather live here or would you rather live in a Muslim country?
I'd rather live in a Muslim country with my people.
Would you prefer to live in America or prefer to live in Somalia?
For me, I think it's Somalia.
You'd prefer to live in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Would you rather live in America or live in Somalia?
I would rather live in Somalia.
Of course, they don't mean that because they came from Somalia saying they were a refugee. They like all the free stuff. So yeah, you can be against mass immigration. In fact, it's a bit unusual if you're not. I mean, statistically unusual, as Angus Reid's poll and really every other poll ever done shows. Most Canadians think we have too many immigrants, just a few percent, 4%, 6%, depending on the poll, say we should actually increase our number, but about half say we should reduce our number, and the rest just don't know. So that's going straight to the question of mass immigration or not. Numbers too high or too low. If you asked people if we should limit immigration from countries that are terrorist-infested failed states like Somalia, I bet the number would be even higher. I bet if you asked now if, given that the Syrian civil war is largely over, if you asked if Syrian refugees who are no longer really refugees, if they should go back, I bet that number would be high too, but it's not allowed in the narrative. And so when this very simple, very underproduced billboard went up, say no to mass immigration, it was a shock, not to normal Canadians who polls show think that way, but to the official keepers of the ideas, the media party, the political establishment. I should point out that it's not just the CBC and the Liberals who hated this billboard. Timid half-conservatives did too. They know that mass immigration is politically deadly to conservative parties in the long run. It's how the Democrats won California. It's how the Democrats will win Texas. They can't get voters to change their minds and be socialists, so they just bring in new voters from Mexico. That's the way they do it in California and Texas. The Liberal plan in Canada couldn't be more explicit. I don't know if you remember our story from a couple years back. Syrian refugees to Canada literally were asked to sign releases, photo releases, on the plane ride over to let Trudeau take a photo with them. That was their most important purpose to Canada, to be campaign props for Trudeau, and obviously to vote for him too, duh. That's why Trudeau goes to all the mosques, including mosques that have been associated with terrorist recruitment. Listen to how Trudeau bragged a few years back about visiting, listen to him say it, the Asuna Wahhabi Mosque in Montreal that the Pentagon says was an Al-Qaeda recruitment center.
Because I spend a lot of time running from the Bangladeshi to the Pakistani to the Maghrebien to the Asuna Wahhabi Mosque. I cover all the different communities,
including the terrorist community, I guess. So yeah, Trudeau knows exactly what he's doing. So does the media. They're pushing mass immigration on Canadians over our democratic wishes. Andrew Scheer typically refuses to fight on these grounds, as I've shown you before. That was actually when Andrew Scheer turned against us, and against me in particular. I asked him some pointed questions about immigration 5 times in a row, and he just refused to answer.
Do you have anything to say about the Syrian migrants or about John McCallum's new numbers? Or, I mean, that's something that I think conservatives, maybe it's just me, but I think a lot of conservatives want to hear something on that. Kelly Lynch isn't talking about security, she's talking about values. What's your view on a values test?
Look,
well, McCallum has said he's going to jack up the numbers probably by 100,000. Do you oppose that? So are you against that? Well, Kelly Lynch has said before they get here, they should be some sort of a values screening. Do you think we should ask any values-laden questions of people before they get here? Well, you just tell me your answer yourself. Do you think, you're saying once people get here, integrate them, teach them. I don't think anyone disagrees. But before they even get here, should we ask them about their values? Should we ask them about Canadian values before we let them in?
That was a lot of clips of me asking questions. I encourage you to watch the whole video. We didn't show his answers because they were not answers. He didn't answer. What was that? 7 times I tried to press him on immigration. He refused to answer. And in recent months, he has said he is fine with Ahmed Hassan's numbers, and he's fine with the countries from which he chooses. So it's an opinion cartel going on in Canada. None of the official parties want to talk about mass immigration. Andrew Scheer quibbles about the processing of immigrants. He wants it to be more orderly at the Roxham Road crossing, but he never quarrels with the quantity, the numbers, certainly not about the cultural fit. No, never. In fact, recently he proudly met with Omar Subadar. He's the guy on the left there. He's the Muslim imam famous for instructions to Canadian Muslim men on how to properly beat your wife. That's his claim to fame. So yeah, Of course, they kept Maxime Bernier out of the debates. They didn't want someone talking about these things, but now they have to keep him off the billboards too. And by they, you know who I mean. I mean the establishment, the elites, the kind of people who don't really live in neighborhoods where every other woman is wearing a burqa. They don't send their kids to schools where Canadian-born kids are the tiny minority. They believe in mass immigration for the same reason that big business and the banks do: drive down the wages, drive up real estate prices, and to keep voting liberal. So these billboards have to be stopped. And so the media party knew exactly what to do. They do what they always do. They don't debate. I mean, that hasn't been fashionable in years. You'd think the media, seeing a controversy, would help talk it out, help lead or host our national discussion on immigration. No. What are you, in the 80s? The media's job is to deplatform, not to platform. Today's journalists believe very deeply in freedom of speech, but only for themselves. Certainly not for anyone outside of their guild. It's obviously worse now that they're all on Trudeau's bailout payroll. So the media went on a campaign. Here's the Calgary Herald, and here's the Globe and Mail, and here's the Toronto Star. They all went on a campaign all weekend of huffing. Here's the Sun, huffing and puffing about how outrageous this was. Here's CTV. Oh, it's racist, by the way. Very, very racist. Yeah, no. If this had said no black immigration or no Chinese immigration, it would be racist. Maybe even saying no Muslim immigration, even though Islam is not a race. I could see how you could call that racist. But this just said no mass immigration. It goes to numbers. How is quarreling over numbers, how is that racist? A political billboard along a busy Halifax highway warning Canadians to say no to mass immigration is being condemned by Premier Stephen McNeil and MP Andy Fillmore. That's how this story in the Trudeau CBC state broadcaster starts. It's true, McNeil is the Premier and Fillmore is an MP. That is true, but it's also true that they're Liberal Party members, and Fillmore himself will be on the ballot against the People's Party in less than 2 months in the election. It's weird how the CBC didn't identify them as Liberals until later in the story, even though that's clearly on their mind. If the CBC had run this as a quarrel between the People's Party and the Liberal Party, which is how a normal journalistic enterprise would have done it, that would be accurate, and it would put the disagreement into the realms of a policy debate between two different competing points of view. But the whole mission here by the CBC was to denormalize and deplatform one side of the debate, not to have a debate. No. The CBC doesn't want a debate on immigration any more than they want a debate on global warming. Case closed, right? So this story was deliberately framed as everybody who's anybody versus some racist kooks. Here's my favorite part. The sign sparked criticism on Twitter. What is Twitter? Twitter is about 320 million busybodies chattering about anything and everything online. It's like the comments section. It's like Facebook. Imagine using that as a news peg, as an authority. The sign sparked criticism on Twitter. Oh, well, then it must be controversial if some people out of 320 million said so. That's not just lazy journalism. It's covering the CBC's own agenda here. No, we're not against it. Some people on Twitter were mean. That's why this is news. This is a CBC hit piece like all of their other hit pieces against Andrew Scheer and Maxime Bernier. They're just using some guy on Twitter as cover for their own agenda. Now, some conservatives, I regret to report, joined the online mob here, hoping that maybe the mob would go easy on them in return. Here's an Ontario Conservative cabinet minister named Stephen Leckie. He tweets, "This sign is a few kilometers from where my mother, along with millions of enterprising newcomers, landed at Pier 21. They chose this country in pursuit of freedom, opportunity, and democracy. Our country needs skilled immigration, and it needs less of this divisive rhetoric." Yeah, but Stephen, the sign didn't say no to skilled immigration. It said no to mass immigration. And it's true that some immigrants come to Canada for freedom, opportunity, and democracy. That's true. Many don't. Too many don't. They come here for the freebies, or the free healthcare, or the easy welfare, and they plan to maintain un-Canadian traditions, not to join our freedom and democracy. The fact that Leckie had to change the billboard's message before disagreeing with it shows maybe the truth of the billboard, and it begs the question, Leckie isn't for mass immigration, is he? Or is he? Is he like Andrew Scheer? He just doesn't want to answer. Anyways, he joined the Twitter mob, I guess. Back to the CBC story. They then did a deep dive into who this third-party group was that financed the billboard, going into the names of the people involved, the dollar amounts, real investigative reporting. Funny, I don't think I've ever seen them do that to, say, third parties that support mass immigration, like the CBC's Journalism Union's third-party campaign. Why don't they ever investigate their own campaign groups, or say those by David Suzuki? Well, I'm just joking. The question answers itself, doesn't it? The CBC whipped up the Twitter outrage. They whipped it up themselves, as did other media party and bailout media sites. The CBC even got a Syrian migrant to talk about how badly his feelings were hurt by the sign. They're campaigning. He's not even a citizen, by the way, but he's Syrian and he started a chocolate company, and the fact that he speaks English well and runs a company is so rare amongst Syrian migrants, 90% of them who are still unemployed, that he's very helpful to the establishment, that fella. Naturally, the CBC brought him out. I mean, it's a campaign, right? And the CBC is campaigning. They're not reporting, they are organizing. At first, the billboard company, Pattison Outdoor, resisted this fake controversy, this manufactured Twitter mob. I mean, they're not a publisher. They're a billboard company. They don't write what's on their signs. They just rent space, and anyone can rent that space. In fact, their neutrality is an important part of functioning democracies. Stop mass immigration is a pretty simple idea, and I think it's the default idea. I mean, shouldn't you have to make the case for mass immigration if you want it? Canadians have never really been asked. Pattison stood firm at first. I mean, after all, the message wasn't obscene, it wasn't illegal, it's clearly a political point of view. They were paid. Pattison can't get into the editing business on politics or on commercials. But look, the establishment wants something. The establishment's going to get something. And within days, Pattison bent the knee. They posted this groveling apology, and they ripped up their signed contract with the third-party group that advertised. Breach of contract out of cowardice. Whipped up by the media, especially the state broadcaster. It was journalists who censored that billboard. Political journalists. They didn't cover the billboard, which is what a journalist would do, report on it. They campaigned against it, which is what a good liberal would do. And then even more bizarrely, the third-party group itself collapsed. I don't even understand this part. Look at this. The third-party advertising group behind billboards promoting Maxime Bernier and his stance on immigration is now distancing itself from the message, saying he had never signed off on the controversial campaign. We completely disavow any sympathy with or support for the views expressed by donors who paid for and selected the content of their advertising, which we were mistakenly not afforded an opportunity to approve. Frank Smink, the head of True North Strong and Free Advertising Corp, wrote in an email to the Canadian press on Monday. Yeah, no, that's obviously not true. I do not believe that a donor to Mr. Smink designed that ad and Mr. Smink bought it without looking at it. You know, here at the Rebel, we put up a lot of billboards. I like this one. I don't know if you remember that one. The billboard companies sell us the space. They print the big poster and they glue it on the billboard, but they don't design it. The artwork comes from the person buying the billboard. It's not even that Pattison Outdoor would have gotten the third-party campaign group's approval first. It's the other way. They would have been waiting for the third party to send them the artwork. That last story doesn't make any sense at all, other than the only explanation I can think of, which is the donors, including Mr. Smink, were so bullied and so harassed by the media party that they thought, I can't even participate in democracy anymore. I would like to participate in democracy, but I can't. Like I say, there's zero scrutiny of left-wing third-party groups in Canada because the media party itself runs third-party groups. There are even foreign entities running third-party groups. Here's George Soros's group called Avaz. They literally list their Broadway, New York office, which is illegal. But this is from the Elections Canada website because Elections Canada is fine with that. And no media care. But donate money to a no-mass immigration billboard? Well, don't be surprised if the CBC shows up at your kid's school with journalists asking other parents how they feel. They feel safe with their children playing with your racist children. That's journalism today. This isn't just the deplatforming of a billboard. This isn't just the silencing of the majority view of Canadians. It's the deliberate conditioning of Canadians that you just got to shut up and withdraw from the political playing field. Get out of the public square if you don't buy into the official narrative. Andrew Scheer has agreed to buy into the official narrative on mass immigration, on the threat of global warming, in the hopes that, I don't know, the big boys will let him play with them. They're the cool kids. Can he join? I don't think it's going to work for him, but the media party likes the fact that they've house-trained him on global warming and on immigration, which is why the media party hates Maxime Bernier so much, an MP that they all used to rather like. He's so charming because these days he says things that they think you shouldn't be able to say. You can disagree with the billboard. You can disagree with Bernier. You can disagree even with the existence of the People's Party, but to silence him and to shut down the billboard company and then to scare the donors. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not Canadian. At least that's not what Canadian used to mean. That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest. And then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.